This house believes that media should not report the news on suicide. メディアは自殺に関しての報道をしないべきである。This house believes that media should not report the news on suicide. There's no preparation time. I'd like to call Prime Minister Hitoha to deliver the speech within 2 minutes. Here.
Start my speech in 3, 2, 1. We think that media sensationalizes suicide and thinks of it as something that can cause attention. We think that suicide is more of a deeper topic that should not be covered by media outlets. Proud to propose this motion. We protect a world where media is not allowed to have news on suicide. So, for example, personal stories, like the Me Too movement, can happen, but it should not be a third person telling the story or interviewing these people and hearing out stories from them. So 2 arguments from PM. 1, we think that the victims of the families of suicide should be protected at all costs. And secondly, we think that suicide should be prevented. So first argument, we victims of these suicides. We think that when media is allowed to report the news on suicide, the families of the victims usually get a lot of interviews or calls. And we think that they're already going through a lot of mental trauma, having experienced someone who is close to them die, right? We think that media exploits these individuals because they're so desperate to get the information first. We think that they're very likely to keep on pestering them until they can get juicy information that can go in the headlines, right? We think that especially because the suicide reports that are going to be popular are suicide reports of celebrities, we think that people are especially desperate in order to get a lot of information. Now, second argument as to why we should prevent suicide. When a celebrity suicides, we think that there are many copycat suicides, right? People who are very passionate about these popular people are likely to think that their life is over. And when media shows these news to try to get a lot of attention, they see this instantly, and we think that this puts a lot of these people into these traumatic situations, right? We think that we need to protect these people from making instantaneous decisions, and media, because it's so fast, we think that we should stop it. Proud to propose.
I thank the Prime Minister for the remark. Now I'd like to welcome the leader of opposition. Please deliver the speech within 2 minutes. Here.
My speech starts in 3, 2, 1, go. Today in my speech, I have 2 things to talk about. First, refutation, and the second is construction. First, moving on to my refutation. They talked about mainly two things. First, sensationalization. And 2 rebuttals here. Firstly, it doesn't happen on both sides because there is a check and balance mechanism that if they distort the fact that the context that they the context of the suicide, if they distort the fact that these companies will be receive backlash from the citizens, right? So and we also say there is a variety of companies, broadcasting companies, which means that there is many companies have incentivized to tell the truth, right? So we think that
information?
It is that isn't the case. No, thank you. And second response is that even if it harms the individuals, it is comparatively better than the world in which there is no report and there is no discourse why he died and why he committed suicide, right? So we think it is comparatively better on our side, so we should take this motion. So moving on to my constructive. So first argument is the freedom of broadcasting. We should guarantee the companies to broadcast it, right? So they didn't prove why they need to ban the broadcasting uniquely of the suicide, right? So there are a variety of things that should be intervening on the government, but they didn't prove the uniqueness of suicide, right? So we should guarantee the companies to freely broadcast anything, because it literally help and contribute to the discourse of the society, right? So because the many experts show on the TV and say something in a very variety of aspect, that means that we can more likely to generate discourse. Second argument is which side can reduce the number of the case of suicide, right? So the answer is on our side, because we can generate discourse, and the reason of committing suicide varies among the individual. Thus, we need discourse. We need to find and explore the reason why they committed suicide. And on our side of the house, we can increase the discourse, and we can reduce the amount of overall cases of suicide. Therefore, we're so proud to oppose. Thank you.
I thank the leader of opposition for the remark. Now I'd like to welcome the Deputy Prime Minister. Please deliver a speech within 2 minutes here.
We believe that the main harm of suicide, so what is so unique to, for example, things like murders, is first that people can commit them freely because it is to themselves. There is not much restrictions holding it against unless it is only you and your mental will to live. Second of all, we believe that in a way, suicide can become, for lack of a better word, a trend. It could be something that people see and people copy. Because of these two reasons, we believe that suicide is uniquely different from anything else, and that is why we should not report on it. So to go into reconstruction I'd like to reconstruct what the PM said. So first of all, we believe that to the LO's point on how this harms the people who are working, the people who went through the suicide, we believe the LO said that, oh, news medias won't do this. However, we believe that the incentive of these news medias is to have a good story, is to make sure that they can have as many viewers watching, as many people looking at the articles, as many people sharing. Because of this, many people tend to dramatize, tend to go out of their way to invade people's privacy so that they can see them cry, so that they can see their family members wrecked in despair. We believe that because of this creates just as much harm as exactly what the Prime Minister said. Now, going on to refute to what the LO said, we believe that this doesn't really do anything in solving suicide, because first of all, this kind of awareness is exactly what is causing suicide in the first place. For example, when you look at reports of suicide, especially of famous people like Kurt Cobain, we believe that they're having many suicides after, people mimicking it, people trying to copy it. And as a government, it's very hard for us to regulate it because there are no laws against it. Because it is to yourself, there isn't much holding you back from jumping off a bridge or slitting your wrist or hanging yourself in your closet. So we believe that many examples of how willing people can be to commit suicide for just very trivial things is the app that was sensationalized in around 2013 called Blue Whale. We believe that in that thing, there was a series of challenges, including self-harm, and the last one was to commit suicide. Many people did commit suicide in the end, and we believe that this is a very important example in showing how vulnerable people can be and why we as a government should not be having these kinds of reports so that we can protect the people. Thank you.
Okay, I thank Deputy Prime Minister for the remark. Now I'd like to welcome Deputy Leader of Opposition. Please deliver a speech within 2 minutes here.
Okay, can everyone hear me? I don't know. Should I turn on my camera or something? Okay. I know this is going to be really bad, but I'll try my best. The proposition's major strategic mistake is that they didn't really prove the uniqueness of media in the first place. That is why they will lose today's debate. I have two major questions in my speech today. Firstly, is it good to actually increase attention on suicide? And secondly, which side is better for the victims of suicide in the first place? So moving on to my first question, is it good to actually increase attention on suicide? Now, the proposition told you mainly two things. Firstly, they talked about the glorification of suicide. Our first speaker already told you why that doesn't happen because of a check and balance system, and in my speech I'd like to elaborate on that check and balance system. So we believe that in the status quo there is such thing as social backlash, and since everyone watches media nowadays, we believe that social backlash is actually big on our side of the house.
Point.
In that, I think if they do sensationalize the details, and if they do make this person that committed suicide as this hero, we believe that people really or make this guy into like a villain or something. We believe that wouldn't really happen because there is this social pressure against these media to actually report on suicide in an objective way. We think that it is a given in the status quo, and we think that proposition completely ignored this thing. Now, the second thing I want to respond to is that they've proven no uniqueness of media banning suicide in the first place. For example, there's things such as books and novels that still sensationalize suicide, and even much more
What's the information?
than media in the first place. Even if media does sensationalize a lot of suicide, we think that is comparatively better. We think that even if we do ban even if we do ban on your side of the house, there's still such things as books and novels, which means that we believe that there is no uniqueness on their side of the house. So if the deadlock is sensationalization, we think that our point about discourse actually breaks this deadlock, and that is why we win today's debate. I'd like to note that they didn't engage to our point about discourse that we talked about in our first speaker speech. Now, the second thing they told you was that when you see suicides, you're going to emulate suicide if it's like a celebrity or something. So firstly, I want to note that if their analysis is true, then people will probably commit suicide if the celebrity dies in the first place. I don't really understand why suicide is so unique on their side of the house, especially because if a celebrity dies, according to their logic, someone will commit suicide. We don't think suicide is particularly unique. But secondly, we think that most people are rational and they would probably think before committing suicide, right? Suicide isn't like a small thing that you do every Thursday, right? It's only because it is a matter of life and death, and we think that people are overall rational. Now, the second thing that I want to get into is which side is better for the victims of the suicide. Now, that the proposition told you that victims of suicide, for example, families, will get interviewed by the mass media, right? Now, yes, we do understand that the mass media will probably interview them. However, we think that the amount of community that they would find an amount of friends and family support that they will find after the media publishes their story will be comparatively better than what they say about harassment, right? Yes, because ultimately, we think harassment from the media is short-term, because when the story dies down, the media will no longer harass them, right? And we already told you about these things like social check and balance systems, like social backlash, will keep the harassment to a safe level. So ultimately, we think the harassment is a very short-term and very negatable harm on their side of the house. So what we think breaks this deadlock is our point about how it would find these individuals will find a community, would find friends and family support, which they probably need if their daughter or son commits suicide, right? So ultimately, we think that our side wins because our side provides a long-term harm, and especially a harm that exists more on our side of the house. For all these reasons, so proud to oppose.
Okay, speech minutes is 2 minutes, so please really be careful about the speech time that you are allocated to you.
We believe in the main in the status quo, there is the problem of restrained development and industrialization going on in these developing nations. For us to solve that, we believe that we should not be legalizing child labor in developing nations because it creates two problems. First, an increasingly difficult poverty cycle, and second, the exploitation of child laborers. So I'd like to talk about these 2 points. First of all, on the poverty cycle, we believe that it is going to be much harder for children to advance and get better careers once this kind of child labor is legalized. There are two main reasons for this. First of all, we believe that when child labor is legalized, it means that these children are not going to be able to go to school that much because they're going to have to take care of their family, because they're going to have to work. That means that they're going to have a delayed education. They're not going to be able to go to universities. They're not going to be able to get their masters. They're not going to be able to go abroad, get these good jobs, which means that they're going to be stuck in this cycle, and their children are going to be in this cycle, keeping going on and on and on for generations to go. Second, we believe that there is going to be an exploitation of child laborers when we do take this motion. I have, again, two reasons for this. First of all, we believe that if we look at the perspective of the people who own these kinds of companies that do use child laborers, we believe that they use these child laborers because they are cheap, because they are efficient, because they are willing to do whatever work it takes, which means that they're going to be very easily exploited. Second, we believe that because these people are going to be in developing nations, that means that it is going to be much harder for certain regulations, such as health codes, to be passed, which means that it is going to be a very dangerous workplace. For example, we're going to imagine children going into mining shafts where they're going to have to inhale smoke odor, where they're going to have to be working through the desk to the ground, where they can't get good healthcare, where they can't get this kind of very good workplace environment. For these two reasons, we can see very definitive harms in this motion, and that is why we believe that it neither solves the problem in the status quo of restrained development, and thus it makes it worse. Thank you.
やばい、完璧。 超かっこいいじゃないですか。なんで
最初噛んじゃったのでごめんなさい。
でもね、最初噛んじゃったけど、まあ、はい。ほぼ完璧、almost perfect. Very well organized, well structured.
Thank you.
Clear signposting and clear conclusion in each argument with clear reasoning. もう毎回これできたらもう何にも文句ないです。毎回 in any situation, in any motion, whether you are in closing opposition, whether the motion is difficult, whether you're tonic, but please make sure to make a structured speech all the time. Just like this. Just like this.
Okay.
超かっこいい。
Okay. Thank you.
Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Child labor exploits young children and destroys their futures. It is impossible to make sure that employers are taking enough care of these children, and children should not be working at all in these dangerous situations in the first place. This debate is about which is better for children in developing nations. The context of this debate, which is developing nations, we believe there are two characteristics. One, the criminal justice system is not the best. So we think that on both sides of the house, child labor will still exist, but on our side of the house, there will be less. Second characteristics, many people are very desperate for income. Now, our model, our stance is that the government should not be allowing child labor. And we think that as the country develops, there'll be more restrictions placed to make sure that child labor does not exist. Our stance, we think that really poor people will not be saved on both sides of the house because they're so desperate that they're going to work in dangerous situations. We think that we want to protect the majority of the middle class people who might be incentivized to put their children in education only if we don't allow child labor in developing nations. We think that even if working conditions get better, children need education full time. They should not be allowed to be working at all. Our burden of proof, two things. One, we'll be proving why education can only be achieved by not legalizing. Secondly, we'll be proving how a balance between labor and education is not possible in developing nations, how we're giving too much power to employers. On top of this, we think that industries in developed countries will be incentivized to buy these products that are cheap and made by children. And we think that this mainstream flow of children working should be stopped. Hence, we're very proud to oppose. Thank you.
いいです。ベンチ全体に思うのは、なんかアンジュヒト派 and I think Ryo Uchi-san made a great opposition speech, but entire case is predicated on assumption that educations are available right now. I mean, if children don't work, then they are able to access education. Is that really true? Are there like sufficient schools to begin with in developing countries? Is it really free? Do they have teachers? Do they have capacity to accept children? So you need to prove that if you have time. I mean, your counterfactual is if we don't legalize child labor, then there isn't an education opportunity. So you need to prove that there are education opportunities to begin with. For example, like Christian institutions or religious organizations have incentive to provide schools and an educational facility to proselytize their faith. So Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt and North Africa usually provide school for free. And many Christian organizations also have incentive to expand their membership, thereby they provide a great schools. Our NGO and NPO, there are many non-governmental organizations or charity institutions globally operating in these developing nations who have a capability to establish schools. They don't have to have a great facility. They just need like rooms and they just have to have teachers. So it's not that resource heavy project to provide schools. And that is why in the status quo, if we don't legalize child labor, there are educational opportunities and it's possible for government to create a narrative to compel families to send their kids to schools rather than factories. みたいな感じで you need to explain why the status quo is better or why the model you define will be better. It's your burden of proof to explain that. みたいな。そうね、チャイルドレイバーを合法化したら学校に行かなくて仕事しちゃうって話は、じゃあ合法化しなかったら現状みんな学校に行ってるんだよ、もしくは行ける機会があるんだよ、行ける世界が広がっていく可能性があるんだよみたいな話は証明責任としてしなきゃいけないよね。比較として現状を守ってるわけだから、現状がいいっていうバーデンはあるんで、それは気をつけてください。それはね、なんていうかな、側が結構崩しやすいところなんですよ。I mean, no school exists, so they have no opportunity for education to begin with. It's better to work みたいな風に言われちゃうんで。
My
Jeff.
speech starts in 3, 2, 1. Currently in the world, in the developing countries, children in developing countries are being exploited and used as a labor in a very bad condition. Because of there is no regulation by the government, there is no intervention to guarantee the safety of the children. Before moving on to my argument, I have 2 pieces of model. First, we are going to introduce laws to guarantee the safety of workplace of the safety of children in the workplace. Second, no children. We cannot expect children prostitution or child slavery because it is extreme case and these things will be excluded from the scope of this debate. So moving on to my argumentation, I have 2 argumentation for today. First point is the legalization is the only way to guarantee the safety of children because the child labor is inevitable in all developing countries, so we should regulate it. So one reasons for the reason why we think that child labor is inevitable is most households are substandard and the standard of living is so extremely low in the developing countries. They are living in a poverty, thus they need to people have to have no choice but to depend on the children's earning and in order to like make them go to school or like make a living, right? So we think illegalizing the child labor does not solve any of the problem because there is certainly a black market in the developing countries. They cannot solve any of the problem. Second argumentation is that how we guarantee the safety within the labor market, right? So we think the labor market is the best way to guarantee the safety and improve the overall economy of the developing countries. 5 layers of analysis. First, we are going to provide a nutrition regularly if the employees, and then if the employee fail to like providing nutrition for them, they will be punished. Second thing is that they will receive benefit each. They will pay benefits to each students, each like children to help their families to make a living. Third thing is that if they are likely to be hurt or injured in these situations, government will be intervene on this and to help out these children. So it is very an efficient way to guarantee the safety. The fourth thing is that they are money. If they are money, they are more likely to receive education, right? It is fundamental for them. It is very important for them to like grow up, right? So fifth thing is that we are going to help children to acquire certain skills that will be useful in like making a career in the future, right? So moreover, if the government regulated it, we can enhance efficiency of manufacturing, and then we can see an economic development because there is more number of people who is working in the workplace, and therefore we can balance out the safety of children and economic growth of the country, and therefore we win this debate. Thank you.
ともちんもノープレパスピーチはしたい？
いや、全然したくない。
全然したくない。はい。
うん、見てたい。
はい。ちょっと、なんか、って感じだね、これ。
難しいんだよな、これすごい。
これちょっとなんか全部微妙。ノープレパスピーチ難しくない？何なの？じゃあ、アンジュ、はい。
できたことないよ、一回。
This house would ban sacrilegious arts.
はい、わかりました。
3, 2, 1, go.
We believe that as the government said, in order to protect as many people as possible, we should be allowed to ban sacrilegious arts, even if it goes against a certain freedom of expression. So I have 2 main reasons for this. First of all, we believe that sacrilegious arts spreads a negative image, especially of religious people. And second of all, that negative image can lead to harm against certain minorities. So going to my first point about how sacrilegious art can spread negative images, I'd like to give you this example of this French artist who was very controversial a few years back, and he created a lot of very negative art that portrayed Muslims in a very negative light. For example, they portrayed them as terrorists, he portrayed them as holding guns, and he had them spread all over, and that created a very negative image of it. And because of that art, there was actually a shooting in France because of that. We believe that this is the kind of very strong impact that sacrilegious art has. Because art is subjective and because anyone can read off of it, we believe that it's very important to make sure that we have these kinds of arts that can be portrayed negatively to make sure that it is not spread to the wide public. Second of all, we believe the reason why sacrilegious art has such an effect on these people is, like I said, that first of all, anyone can see it. And second of all, that, well, art is very subjective. It depends on the person who sees it, whether it is good, whether it is positive, whether it is negative, whether it is something to behold or whether it is something to hide. We believe that because of this, it can lead to a lot of terrorism, especially to minority groups. We believe that as the government side, it is our responsibility to protect the most vulnerable, to protect the religious minority can be harmed when there is sacrilegious art. For these reasons, we as the government believe that we should ban sacrilegious art. ごめんなさい。
うまいな、うまいな。I mean, case is fine. I mean, it's better to use some analogies. One expression state has already banned, like hate speech, or for example, right, or defamation, or public display of like pornographic expressions in public. Maybe you can analogize those examples to further justify your position. But basically, case was fun. Really great speech. わかりやすいですね。
ありがとうございます。
こんな難しいモーションノープレパでできるのちょっとすげえなと思います。じゃあ今やっていきましょうか。ノープレパで2分スピーチしてもらうだけなんで、一回やっていきましょうよ。
じゃあ、
はい。This house would require individuals to pass a general knowledge test in order to gain the right to vote. いきなり来た人にね、ノープレパでこれさせて、はい、とか言ってね。はい。じゃあ、3、2、1、go.
Okay. My time will begin in 3, 2, 1. We think that individuals should pass a general knowledge test in order to gain the right to vote for two reasons. Firstly, for a better, more productive politics, and secondly, to get the representation that is needed in the status quo. So firstly, why there will be better discourse and like better political movements when individuals are passing like a certain general. Okay, actually before that, I want to move on to framing. So we think that in terms of general knowledge tests, it isn't going to be like an extremely hard test that nobody can pass. It's probably going to be like a test that like to some degree, if you receive like mandatory education, or even if you didn't receive mandatory education, if you like get if you like kind of have access to like state resources that we are going to provide for free, for example, like courses on politics and etc., then you're probably going to be able to like pass these kind of tests. So therefore, we don't think that this test is going to be extremely hard. And even if it is, we'll provide like state subsidies and like provide free courses to ensure that individuals who really want to pass and get the right to vote will be able to pass and like get the right to vote. Okay, so first point about why there'll be a more productive politics. So we think that in the status quo, politicians are catering to like the more like politicians like Donald Trump is becoming elected in the status quo and are getting attention because he's catering to like the kinds of voters that aren't as politically involved and that can believe some things just by hearing it, right? So we think that therefore by having them pass a certain like test on politics and by having them know about to what extent the parliament can do and etc., we think that politicians would be more catering towards like a population that knows more about politics, that is more aware about the actual problems in the status quo. And therefore, we think that politicians that have the more realistic side, or for example, politicians that actually can propose like the most urgent issues and etc., will likely get elected as a result of this policy being implemented. Therefore, we think that politics will overall be more productive. But second layer of analysis, we think that the kinds of discourse would happen in like cases of these elections would be more productive as well. We think that when public is generally more informed because they have to pass a certain test to be able to receive the right to vote in the first place, we think that it's likely that the public will be more politically interested. And therefore, we think that there will be like better discourse in terms of politics before elections and etc., because all individuals to some degree do want to receive the right to vote because they do want a certain say in politics, right? We're so proud to propose.
うまいですね。うまいな。まずね、セットアップがちゃんとしてるね。 こんな勉強できない人どうすんだって僕が言ってくるのにちゃんとプリエンプトしてるし、アーギュメントも分かりやすいです、非常に。なんか何がいいって、あんまりそのバーデンが重いポイント作らないのがいいね。なんか証明しやすそうなポイントを選んで作った時に。なんか、社会がめっちゃ良くなりますとかじゃなくて、アットリースト、ディスコースは起きて、ちょっとアクティブになるよね、みんなは。みたいな。It's very easy to prove case. It's really great strategies. みんな、なんか重いポイント背負い込んでそのまま続けるんだよね。How we can change society みたいな。How we can protect environment みたいな。なんかもっとその一段階したのがよくて、How we can reduce the amount of CO2 とかさ、のがいいじゃん、なんか、例えば。それで言うと、なんか、よかったのは reasonable case。Like, more active discourse and political awareness and productive は、なんか、政治の政策の質が良くなるかどうかわかんないけど、最低限でもちょっとその関心が高まって、ディスコースアクティブになるよねっていう、その証明できる範囲のポイントを選ぶ力がいいです、非常に。なんで、
ありがとうございます。
バーデンコントロールがうまくできてる。あとみんなが当たり前だと思って飛ばしちゃうところにもちゃんとリーズニング一応つけてて、そもそもみんなテスト受かりたいよね。だってね、ライトボート欲しいし、なんでかっていうと、ある程度発言権欲しいじゃん、政治には。っていうところちゃんと説明してたじゃん。意外とここ抜かしちゃうんだよね。なんかみんながライトボート欲しい前提で議論が進んじゃうんだけど、それを誰も説明してないみたいなことが起きちゃうのよ。でも、こういうなんか当たり前で飛ばしちゃうことにちゃんと説明してるのが偉い。ディベーターって忘れがちなんだよね。こういう、なんか needless to say みたいな感じになっちゃうんだけど、ちゃんとそこを説明してるじゃん。People want to get right to vote to some extent because people want to have a say in politics みたいな。なんで、そういうとこもよかった。飛ばしちゃう、なんか丁寧だった。だから飛ばしちゃうところを普通の人がちゃんと一個説明入れてるのがよかった。で、ノープレパーにしてはもう上出来だと思います。
ありがとうございます。
はい。This house supports the usage of violence by environmental campaign groups to achieve their goals. 他の人ポイしていいですよ。2分で、ポイが入ったら2分半とかで。
はい。
むずいかな、いいや。
いや。
いや、いいよ、むずい。むずい。
いや、大丈夫です。
はい、どうぞ。はい。
Environmental problems are so severe that we need to use violence. We should support the usage of violence so that people can achieve the goals. Very proud to propose this motion. I'll be talking about two things. One, I'll be talking about why environmental problems are so severe in the status quo and how only violence can solve this problem. So why is environmental problems so difficult right now? The problem is that many people are very intent on making a lot of profit, right? That means that they're likely to deprioritize climate change. And the uniqueness of climate change is that you don't really know the impact of your actions. For example, if you throw away one piece of trash, you're not going to know how much of an impact that has on Earth, right? But like 70 billion people are doing that right now. And many people are careless because they don't see what's so bad about their actions. We think that environmental campaign groups, even when they use peaceful approaches, people are not going to care because they are busy. They have their own things to do, and they don't want to, like, for example, not buy hamburger because they don't want to have like trash, right? We think that when people use violence, it creates a lot of attention. And why is this attention? Yes.
Okay, so in the status quo, these environmental activists are gaining attention by making a case that seems like the environment is so detrimental. Why is this not sufficient?
Because as I've already told you, people don't care enough about the environment as to like get out of their way to not put these not do these actions that are going to harm the earth, right? We think that when violence is used, people are going to realize that how the urgency of this case. When it is when people are just saying things, we think that it is hard for people to relate, and because people are not able to see their how good their actions are, we think that we need to use violence. So how would violence create better outcomes and not bad ones? For example, backlash. We think that when people use violence for environmental groups, it's different from, for example, fighting towards a different case, right? You're fighting towards people who are not caring enough about the environment. And we think that when people, we think that it is unique and that it is not harming other individuals, for example, minorities, but rather blaming, for example, CEOs or people who have had a lot of negative impact on the earth. We think that because environmental problems are so urgent, we need to support people who are going to use violence.
Speech? Okay, great. You know, more ね、論題見たときにいろんなポイント言わなきゃいけないと思うけど、どこに一番時間をかけた方がいいかは見抜いた方がいいかもね。現状問題があります。やばいですっていうのは、イントロで一言15秒言えば済むと思うよ。でも、バイオレンスを使うことによって人々の意識が変わりますっていうパートは結構大変じゃん、消滅するの。ってことはそっちに時間をかけた方がいいよね、多分ね。っていう、you need to have a trade-off or priority in your speech みたいな。まあね、2分でね、プレパなしでやれって言ってるのにそんなことできないわって思うかもしれないけど、if you have extra power, then you can do that. みたいな。はい。で、これを、プレパなしで2分。This house will prohibit slum tourism.
And I'm gonna be your prime minister.
はい、Prime Minister.
I'm gonna set my timer. 2 minutes.
はい。
Is it 2 minutes? Okay. Let's be here in 3, 2, 1, go. Currently, the many like multinational corporations or like rich people are exploiting the poor, using the strategy to they like making it a very like fascinating, making the slum as a very fascinating and like attract many tourists. But these profits is all these profits are absorbed in these rich people, and this profit gained by the slum tourism would not return to the people and residents living there. So therefore we are so proud to propose. So we are going to today we are going to prohibit slum tourism because of 2 reasons. First, and as I said in my introduction, these like the slum tourism will not benefit the do not alleviate the poverty in the slum at all. So second thing is that we should allocate more money, allocate the money more to like improve the infrastructure in the slums. So first, about the first point, we think that we need to in the status quo, the many like rich people or rich companies like attract many people around the world to like
What is Reformation?
No, thank you. Attract many people to see around, go to sightseeing for the slums, right? So, but these monies would not like return to the poor
information?
people, because of like these people, poor like rich people do not have any incentive to like return the money back to the poor people. Rather, they use it for like raise more profit through like making more like tours, right? So okay, I'll take it for you.
Okay, even if these rich people are somewhat exploiting the poor, in the status quo, these poor people are able to get some money by operating gift shops and etc. The comparative on your side means they will get no money at all for these poor people through tourism. How do you defend that?
Okay, even if there are some profit we can expect for the poor people, but they are in this like process of tourism, many rich people are dumping some garbage to the street, and they destroying the household or like destroying the like condition of their living, because many people invade their households and take photos and to like up on the social media, right? So in these cases, rich people or like tourists will invade their household and literally like harms the household, and which lower the standard of their living. So which is very harmful, because it's so the people living in the slum is living in the extreme poverty. Therefore, this kind of invasion could harm their life. So therefore, we should intervene on this, and we should allocate more money to like improve the infrastructure in the slums, and we have zero power to propose.
はい、OK です。いいですね。This house would ban alcohol. Let's go.
Alcohol is harmful not only individual but also for society as a whole. Alcohol causes serious diseases such as heart disease or infertility, like life lifestyle-related disease, and they get aggressive if they drink too much. Why this is bad in this? I have 2 points. The first point is government should protect and guarantee nation health as much as possible. Why drug is banning? Government should guarantee workforce when many people when many people cannot work because of this nation cannot function. So to protect nation's health is government responsibility. Secondly, burden on hospitals workforce is very low and not enough, and heart disease or such and such kind of disease caused by alcohol occupy huge part of burden of a hospital, and it's especially serious in colony society because medical people are busy treating COVID-19 infected patients. So this is why we have to ban now. And thirdly, harmful others. Opposition must say health this disorder is not is problem is individual problem. So and because of freedom of choice, it depends on individual. However, it causes violent accident and drink driving, and those causes are often happening even now. So it means the alcohol will hurt not only drinkers but also other people around them. So we have to ban it. And second, next I will explain banning is why banning is needed, because even if we struck it, the proportion of alcohol, the limit of alcohol is very different of individuals. So this drug is very difficult and not function well, I think. So this is why we're happy to propose. Thank you.
はい、いいですね。相当いいですよ。相当うまいですよ。次からもう試合しましょうか。次の回からは。もうなんか試合全然できますね。もうなんか何がいいかっていうと、一つ目になんか相手の議論を想定して組み込んでるよね、ちゃんと。相手はフリーダムオブチョイスとか言うかもしれないけど、これハームとアザーしてるからっていう。これね、なかなかできないんですよ、みんな教えても。基本的に自分の議論を作るときは相手の議論を組み込んでトレードオフさせるっていう言い方をするんだけど、なかなかこうみんなできないんですよね。でも組み込まれてるんで、なんか相手が言ってくることを分かった上でトレードオフさせてるんで、非常にいいです。個人の権利が失われたとしても、別に個人の権利じゃなくて他人に迷惑かけてる事例なんで、フリーダムをちょっと制限できますとか、あとコロナっていう今のコンテクストを抑えたのも良かったですね。セカンドリーズンって、病院のキャパが小さいからって、なんか Why now? みたいな、なんでそれ今やんのみたいな、そのコンテクストを抑えたスピーチ、なんで今やんなきゃいけないのかっていうコンテクストを抑えたスピーチができてたのが良かったです。で、それからなんで、最後なんかバーデンオブプルーフ的になんでバンなのかっていうところを証明しなきゃいけないじゃないですか。タックスとかレギュレーションじゃなくて。で、なんかアルコールの許容度が結構人によって違うから、一律で禁止しなきゃいけないですよねみたいな感じで、その証明責任にダイレクトに答えてたんで、これかなり高度なスピーチだし、かなりレベルの高いスピーチです。なんで、ちょっと自信持ってください。で、次からもう試合をさせます。なんかもう、本人がどう思ってるか知らないけど、ちょっと自信ないかもしれないけど、俺はそんなこと知ったことじゃないんで、もう自分はもう完全にスピーチのレベルだけでこう判定してるので、人を。なんで、もう次からはもう普通に混じってもやってもらおうかなって感じです。なんで、特に問題ない。なんかね、ゆっくり喋ったらいいかもね。あと、なんか多分ラッシュしてたから、なんつうの、落ち着いて、もうちょっとゆっくり喋ると偉そうに聞こえるのよ。なんか偉そうに聞こえた方がさ、かっこいいじゃん。アンジュとかめっちゃ偉そうじゃん。なんか、誰だよ、お前みたいな。でもあれはさ、なんかかっこいいじゃん、やっぱり。なんか、もうちょっとこう、なんか余裕持って、喋ったらすごいいいと思います。よくなると思います。
データイミュニティですね。
はい。
Okay.
This house would offer dictator immunity in return for living power.
Now, at the top of my speech, I want to characterize what dictators are in the first place. We think that dictators are addicted to power. That's why they become dictators in the first place. That means that dictators need to have an actual incentive in order to leave power, because ultimately dictators are addicted to this type of power-hungry idea. That is why dictators need an incentive to actually get off of power in the first place. And the reason why we think that force is not a good power is because ultimately we know the dictators will use anything in their power to protect the power that they have in the particular their nation. That means that even if he used force, the dictator will probably ruin the country before giving up his seat of power. So ultimately, we think that it's better for immunity in return for leaving power, because ultimately that provides a far better incentive of actually living, which we believe is far better in terms of power. So I would like to move on to my first point, which is about how dictators will feel more incentivized to actually leave their seat of power at the end of the day. Now, as I already characterized, dictators are addicted to power, but we think that an incentive to actually live a full life is better than actually taking that addiction to power in the first place. So so ultimately, we think that at the end of the day, like dictators, because so what we think that dictators do in the first place is that they rule in countries that are very corrupt. They rule in governing countries that are very corrupt, which means that probably like the US coalition or NATO will probably attack that country in order to save human lives or save or do humanitarian efforts. That means that dictators are far more likely to be swept under the rug compared to other things like compared to the capitalist nations or democratic nations. So but even in that scenario, we think that dictators will not actually leave their seat of power because they're addicted to power, and we believe that they will rather use up the country's resources, use up their own citizens in order to defend their country to the fullest. But we think that it's far because they know that their lives are at stake, they know that their power is at stake if they actually lose that if they lose their seat of power in the first place. So if we do give them immunity, we're actually saving their lives, which means that ultimately it would increase the incentive for dictators to actually leave their seat of power in a peaceful way. So we think that the lives of the millions of people that are going to be affected in the war to actually de-seat that dictator is the most vulnerable individuals in society, and because we protect those individuals, we think that we win today's debate.
めっちゃいいですね。めっちゃわかりやすいですね。フォースを使った場合と、イミュニティを発行して降りてもらった場合の比較をするのがすごく良かったですよ。これはそういう多分ディベートが一番いいですよね。多分イミュニティがベストかどうかは分かんないけど、他の方法と比べたときにマシだよねみたいなのがいいんですよ、多分。例えば、the imposing economic sanction or military intervention by NATO, like which will cause massive casualties and harm. So it's better to provide disruptions. What's the trade-off? We can prioritize the peaceful outcome, but this dictator does not receive retribution, no punishment, right? So that's what we sacrifice. But that trade-off is fair from the perspective of utilitarianism or pragmatism. The number of life, the number of casualty, that's what we need to minimize. So if people are happy, that's better value that we need to seek out. みたいな感じのね、ディベートになってくると思うんですよね、おそらく。という意味で、you made a comparison between the case of use of force versus the case of peaceful and benevolent the solution, which is providing immunity to dictator. That was very great comparison. はい、ということで、よかったです。
もういいですか？
はい、いいですよ。
はい。We should burn alcohol because this act is very dangerous and troublesome act for persons. I have 2 points. Firstly, many people lose their responsibilities for drinking alcohol. So it may develop the violent accident. There were such cases in the past. So if we burn alcohol, such cases aren't existed forever, and lose injustice trouble to victims. Secondly, if persons are drink alcohol, they may give many trouble to others. For example, people, especially women, pay attention working at night because there are some or many strangers at night. One people are drunken persons. The public thinks that their act was limited by drunken persons. If they talk with drunken persons, because drunken persons lose responsibilities. So drunken persons don't understand their act. If we introduce this system, these persons don't exist, so it is little easy for public to work at night. For these reasons, we should introduce the system to get a comfortable life for our thinking.
ちょっと待って、いきなりうまくなったんだけど、なんかそういうもんなの？なんかさっきさ、一文しか言えなかったよね。
確かに。
あれはもう完全にパニックってて、普段だいたい7分間で3分っていうような感じで準備してるので、7分間で3分間のスピーチをっていう感じで準備してるので、急に3分間って言われてもうわけわかんなくなったっていう。
でももう慣れたからできるようになったみたいな感じですよね、多分。もう慣れた。
そう、慣れてはいないですね。
いや、大丈夫です。いや、びっくりして、なんかこの1時間でちょっと人格変わったのかなって思った。で、でもじゃあもうできるってことが分かったんで、次から試合入れちゃいます。だってもう普通にできる。俺はなんか1点読めない人なのかなと思ってたのが、いきなり普通にポイント2つ作るじゃんと思って。なんか全然できるじゃんと思ったんで。
ありがとうございます。
もう少しね、ゆっくり喋ってもいいかも。例えば、ファーストポイントとかも、Many people will lose responsibility when they are drunk. Therefore, they develop violent accidents. Those accidents happened in the past. Therefore, みたいなぐらいのスピードでいいかも。今ちょっとやっぱラッシュしちゃってるんで、ちょっとやってみてください。ファースト、じゃあセカンドポイントをちょっと今ゆっくり説明できる。セカンドポイント。
セカンドポイント全部ですか？
止めるまでいい。
わかりました。
ちょっとゆっくりめに喋れるテンポ。
Secondly, if persons drink alcohol, they may give many trouble to others. For example, people, especially women, pay attention working at night because there are many strangers at night. When people are drunken persons, the public think that their act was limited by drunken persons. If they talk with drunken persons because drunken persons will the responsibility, so they don't understand their act. If we burn alcohol, this person don't. This.
OK だいぶ良くなった。で、次は、ちょっと肩の力を抜けます。ちょっとこう、リラックスした状態で、ファーストポイントを今と同じぐらいのスピードで喋ります。ちょっとこう、アップにならないで、こうリラックスした状態で、ファーストポイントをゆっくり説明できます。
Personally, many people lose their responsibilities for drinking alcohol, so it may develop the violent accident. There were such cases in the past. So if we burn alcohol, such cases aren't existed forever and losing injustice trouble to victim.
だいぶ良くなった。だいぶ良くなりました。はい。この感じで毎回できます。ちょっとリラックスして肩の力抜いて、で、ちょっとテンポゆっくりめに話す感じ。これですごくはっきりなんていうの聞こえるですよね。スピーチがかっこよく。
はい。
それでいきましょう。毎回この感じでやってみてください。めちゃくちゃ良くなりました。
ありがとうございます。
毎週月曜日夜20時から高校生向けに英語ディベートをオンラインで練習しています。興味がある人はぜひ連絡してみてください。Let's join High School Debate Bootcamp!